Heavenly Father, I come before you today with a grateful heart. I come before you at the beginning of this new month of June, and I thank you, Lord, for allowing me to see this day. Thank you for life. Thank you for breath. Thank you for another opportunity to experience your goodness, your mercy, and your grace. The dashboard clock glowed 11:59 p.m. as Daniel rested both hands on the steering wheel without turning the key. The parking lot outside his apartment building had grown almost silent. A few porch lights flickered in the distance, and somewhere nearby a train horn echoed through the night. On the passenger seat lay a folded notebook filled with numbers that refused to cooperate. Rent due in a few days, medical expenses for his mother, repairs his aging truck desperately needed, and a list of job applications that had produced little more than polite rejection emails. The month was ending exactly as it had begun, with more questions than answers. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Father, I know you hear me, but I don't understand what you're doing." When the clock changed to midnight, nothing dramatic happened. No unexpected phone call interrupted the silence. No notification announced a life-changing opportunity. The sky did not suddenly brighten. Yet Daniel noticed something he hadn't paid attention to in months. His Bible rested on the back seat, exactly where his young daughter had left it after church the previous Sunday. She had slipped a small paper bookmark between its pages with a child's uneven handwriting that read, "Don't forget God's promises." He smiled despite himself. It felt almost too simple to matter, but something urged him to reach for it before walking inside. The bookmark rested in the book of Revelation. As Daniel opened the page, his eyes settled on Revelation 3:8. "See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut." He had read those words many times before, yet tonight they sounded different. The promise wasn't telling him that every wish would instantly come true. It reminded him that when God opens a path according to His purpose, no disappointment, no failure, and no human obstacle can permanently stand against it. Daniel realized he had spent months staring at every door that had remained closed, while forgetting to ask whether God might be preparing one he couldn't yet see. That thought followed him upstairs. His apartment looked exactly as he had left it earlier that evening. Laundry waited to be folded. Dishes rested in the sink. Life had not changed in the space of a few minutes, but his heart had become quieter. Instead of listing everything he feared about the month ahead, he found himself thanking God for things he had overlooked. Another sunrise he would soon witness, a daughter who still believed her father could smile again, faithful friends who continued checking on him, and the steady presence of Christ that had never abandoned him, even in seasons when heaven seemed silent. Before going to bed, Daniel knelt beside the couch. For the first time in many weeks, he didn't ask God to hurry. He simply prayed, "Lead me through the door you have already chosen. Help me recognize it when it appears." He climbed into bed with no guarantee that tomorrow would be easier. Yet deep inside, something had shifted from panic to expectation. What Daniel could not possibly know was that before the first week of the new month came to an end, someone from his past would unexpectedly reach out. And that single conversation would force him to confront a chapter of his life he thought God had already finished writing. Daniel woke before sunrise the next morning, not because his problems had disappeared, but because his mind felt unusually still. The unpaid bills were still on the kitchen counter. His inbox still held more silence than opportunity. Yet instead of reaching for his phone, he opened his Bible again. This time, his eyes were drawn to Isaiah 4:1-10. "Do not fear, for I am with you. I will strengthen you and help you." Those words were more than comfort. They reminded him that God's first response to fear is often His presence before His provision. Daniel realized he had been asking God to remove every hardship, while God had been quietly promising never to leave him in the middle of it. Over the next few days, nothing extraordinary happened. He continued sending applications, helping neighbors with small repair jobs, and caring for his mother after work. If someone had looked at his life from the outside, They would have seen an ordinary man living through another ordinary week. But inside, a different story was unfolding. He stopped measuring God's faithfulness by dramatic breakthroughs and began noticing quiet mercies instead. A stranger paid for his coffee without explanation. An old friend sent a message simply asking how he was doing. His daughter laughed freely at dinner, filling the apartment with a joy that had been missing for months. These moments didn't erase his struggles, but they reminded him that God's kindness often arrives in whispers before it arrives in victories. One evening, while walking through a nearby park after work, Daniel reflected on Psalm 23. The psalm speaks of the Lord as a shepherd who leads his people beside still waters and through dark valleys. What struck him was that the shepherd never promised the valley would disappear. Instead, he promised to walk through it with his sheep. Daniel wondered how many times he had mistaken God's silence for his absence, when in reality the shepherd had been walking beside him every step of the way. Perhaps the greatest open door wasn't a new paycheck or a sudden promotion. Perhaps it was learning to trust the shepherd even when the destination remained hidden beyond the next hill. That weekend, Daniel volunteered at church, something he had quietly stopped doing months earlier because disappointment had drained his desire to serve. As he stacked chairs after the service, an older man approached him with a warm smile. They spoke for only a few minutes, exchanging stories about family, work, and faith. Before leaving, the man paused and said, "I don't know why, but I feel like God is telling me that your waiting season isn't wasted. Keep saying yes to him, even when you can't see where he's leading." Those words stayed with Daniel long after the church had emptied. He had heard encouraging messages before, but this felt different. It wasn't a prediction. It wasn't a promise of instant success. It was a reminder that God often shapes a person's character during the very season they wish would end the fastest. As Daniel drove home, his phone rang. The caller had displayed a name he hadn't seen in almost 5 years. His heart began to race. He hesitated before answering, completely unaware that this unexpected conversation was about to open a door he had never imagined. And it wasn't the opportunity he had been praying for. Daniel took a slow breath before answering the call. The familiar voice on the other end belonged to Michael, a former supervisor he had not spoken to in years. After a few moments of catching up, Michael admitted that he had almost deleted Daniel's number. At the last second, he felt an unexpected urge to call. "I don't know why," he said with a quiet laugh, "but your name came to mind all morning." Daniel expected to hear about a job opening, but that wasn't why Michael had called. Instead, he asked if Daniel would be willing to mentor a small group of younger employees who were struggling with discouragement after a difficult season at work. The position wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't the financial breakthrough Daniel had imagined. In fact, it would require him to give his time before receiving any reward. For a brief moment, disappointment crept back into his heart. Was this really the open door God had been preparing? Then another passage came to his mind, Romans 8:28, which reminds us that God works in all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Paul wasn't saying that every circumstance feels good. He was revealing that God can weave even confusing moments into a greater story of redemption. Daniel realized he had been expecting God to answer his prayers by changing his circumstances first. Instead, God had been preparing him to become the kind of man who could walk faithfully through whatever came next. Daniel accepted the invitation. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. As he encouraged others to trust God's promises, his own faith grew stronger. The conversations he shared with those young employees reminded him of how often God had carried him through seasons he thought would never end. He spoke honestly about fear, unanswered prayers, and waiting. He didn't pretend to have all the answers. Instead, he pointed them toward the one who remained faithful when life made little sense. Little by little, the doors Daniel had long prayed for began opening. Not all at once, but one step at a time. One of the families he met through the mentoring program recommended him for a stable position with a local company. The work matched his skills, offered steady income, and allowed him to care for his mother without sacrificing time with his daughter. Soon afterward, another unexpected opportunity appeared to earn additional income using talents he had nearly forgotten. None of these blessings arrived overnight. They unfolded quietly, almost unnoticed, like sunrise replacing darkness, one gentle ray at a time. Looking back, Daniel understood something that had escaped him on that lonely night in the parking lot. The greatest miracle of the new month had not been a sudden change in his bank account. It had been the transformation of his heart. Fear no longer made his decisions. Hope did. He stopped living as though every closed door was the end of his story, and began believing that God was leading him toward doors perfectly timed for his life. He often returned to Matthew 11:28, where Jesus invites the weary to come to him for rest. Daniel discovered that this invitation wasn't only for moments of exhaustion, it was a way of living. True rest comes from trusting Christ with tomorrow instead of trying to control it ourselves. The peace he found did not depend on perfect circumstances. It came from knowing that the Savior who called him forward would never abandon him halfway through the journey. As another month approached, Daniel stood once again beneath the evening sky. This time, there were still responsibilities to carry and prayers that remained unanswered. But there was no bitterness in his heart. He had learned that God's open doors are rarely rushed, His favor is never random, and His timing is always wiser than our own. Sometimes the first blessing of a new season is not the opportunity we receive, but the person we become while faithfully waiting for it. If you are stepping into a new month carrying burdens that feel too heavy to bear, remember this: the God who guided Daniel is the same God who walks beside you today. He sees every silent prayer, every hidden tear, and every hope you've been afraid to speak aloud. Even when you cannot yet see the path ahead, His hand is already there, gently leading you toward a future shaped by His love, His wisdom, and His perfect purpose. Before you leave, take a quiet moment and tell us one word that describes what you're believing God for in this new season. Your story may become the encouragement someone else needs today. If messages like this strengthen your faith, consider subscribing to Divine Trace so we can continue walking this journey together. May the Lord fill your days with steady hope, gentle peace, and the confidence that every step is safely held in His hands.